Delays happened every day at Hawthorne Feedlot. Trucks arrived late. Paperwork got held up in offices 3 states away. Veterinary inspections ran over schedule. The rhythm of a commercial cattle operation absorbed these disruptions, the way Texas soil absorbed summer rain, quickly, efficiently, without drama. When the transport truck scheduled to pick up Thunderstrike didn't arrive Thursday morning, Ezra Hawthorne barely registered it as a problem. Just another adjustment in a business built on adjustments. Clint, the transport company, called, Ezra said, finding his lead handler near the loading chutes. Truck broke down outside San Antonio. They're sending a replacement tomorrow morning. Clint nodded, making a note on his clipboard. So Thunderstrike stays one more day? One more day. It was that simple. No emergency, no crisis. Just a bull staying 24 hours longer than planned because mechanical systems failed and logistics required flexibility. Thunderstrike had been at Hawthorne Feedlot for 93 days, the standard finishing period for cattle in commercial operations. He'd arrived from a breeding facility in Oklahoma, a massive Brahman bull whose size and genetics made him valuable for specific buyers who wanted his bloodline but not his aggressive temperament for active breeding programs. The feedlot model was straightforward. Receive cattle, feed them controlled diets to maximize weight gain, minimize handling to reduce stress, process them through health protocols efficiently, and ship them to buyers when ready. Everything measured, calculated, optimized. Ezra had run this operation for 18 years, taking over from his father who'd built it from 30 acres into a respected facility processing 300 head annually. The work was practical, profitable, and operated within every regulation the state and federal government required. He was good at it. The business functioned smoothly. Thunderstrike was just another animal in the system, scheduled for pickup Thursday, delayed until Friday. One extra day among 93 made no statistical difference. But that extra day would reveal things the routine had kept carefully hidden. Friday morning started normally. Ezra walked the facility at dawn, checking water systems, feed distribution, fence integrity. The feedlot spread across 40 acres of Central Texas landscape, holding pens organized by arrival date, feed stations calibrated for optimal nutrition, loading facilities designed for efficient animal movement, everything clean, everything functional, everything exactly as regulations specified. Delilah Riverson arrived at 7 a.m., as she did every Friday to deliver hay from her small ranch 10 miles south. At 52, she'd known Ezra since they were kids in the same rural school district, back when Austin was smaller and feedlots were family operations rather than corporate investments. Heard your pickup got delayed, she said, unloading bales with practiced efficiency. Mechanical failure. New truck comes this afternoon, so Thunderstrike gets an extra day of your hospitality. Ezra smiled slightly. He's not complaining. But that wasn't quite true. Thunderstrike stood in his holding pen, a space measuring exactly what Texas agricultural code required for an animal his size. He had water, shade structure, feed delivered on schedule, everything adequate, everything legal. Yet his posture showed something Ezra had learned to ignore in 18 years of running this operation. Resignation. Not suffering, exactly. Not distress that would trigger veterinary intervention. Just the flat, patient endurance of an intelligent animal existing in circumstances designed for efficiency rather than comfort. He's a big one, Delilah observed, studying Thunderstrike from the fence. How much does he weigh? 2,800 pounds. Buyer specifically wanted his size. What buyer? Breeding facility in Nevada. They'll use him for a few years, then probably send him to slaughter when he's past his prime. Delilah was quiet for a moment. That's the business, I guess. That's the business. But something in her tone made Ezra look at Thunderstrike differently than he had in 93 days. The bull stood near the water trough, not drinking, just existing. His massive frame fit the pen dimensions technically, but watching him now, Ezra noticed how little room remained for actual movement beyond standing, drinking, eating. Legally sufficient, functionally adequate, morally something else. Ezra, Delilah said carefully, when was the last time that bull had room to actually walk? The question landed wrong. He walks, from feed station to water, from shade to sun. I mean really walk. More than 10 steps in a straight line. Ezra felt defensive irritation rise. Delilah, this is a feedlot, not a pasture operation. The whole point is controlled environment, minimal energy expenditure, maximum weight gain. That's how the industry works. I know how it works. I'm just asking when he last walked. Ezra didn't answer because the answer was 93 days ago, when Thunderstrike had been unloaded from the transport truck and moved into this pen where he'd stood, essentially motionless, for 3 months. Standard practice, industry norm, completely legal. But watching the bull now, with Delilah's question hanging in the air, Ezra saw something he'd trained himself not to see. An animal with nowhere to go, nothing to do, existing in a space that met every regulatory requirement while providing nothing resembling a life. I should check the loading equipment, Ezra said, walking away from the conversation and the uncomfortable observation it had created. By noon, Dr. Magnolia Clearwater arrived for her regular Friday inspection. At 45, she'd been the feedlot's contracted veterinarian for 6 years, conducting health assessments, reviewing medical protocols, ensuring compliance with animal welfare regulations. Everything looks good, she said, reviewing her notes after examining 15 head. No respiratory issues, no injuries requiring treatment, feed consumption within normal ranges. Thunderstrike's getting picked up this afternoon, Ezra mentioned. Want to do a final check before he ships? They walked to Thunderstrike's pen together. Dr. Clearwater conducted her examination with professional efficiency, checking eyes, listening to heart and lungs, palpating for any signs of illness or injury. He's healthy, she confirmed. Good weight, no medical concerns. He'll pass buyer inspection without issues. Good. But Dr. Clearwater didn't move immediately. She stood watching Thunderstrike with an expression Ezra couldn't quite read. Ezra, can I ask you something off the record? Sure. Does this ever bother you? Does what bother me? This. She gestured at the pen, the feedlot, the entire system. We measure everything by whether animals are sick or injured, whether they're gaining weight appropriately, whether they meet regulatory standards, but we never ask if they're okay. Ezra felt that defensive irritation return. Magnolia, they're livestock, commercial cattle. This isn't a petting zoo. I know what it is. I'm asking if you ever wonder if meeting minimum standards is the same as doing right by them. The question hung between them like humidity before a storm. I follow every regulation, Ezra said carefully. Every single one. If there's a problem with how I run this operation, cite me for it. There's nothing to cite. You're in complete compliance. Dr. Clearwater closed her medical kit. That's exactly the problem, isn't it? The system says this is fine. But standing here looking at that bull, I'm not sure fine is good enough. She left shortly after, her inspection report showing all green marks, her face showing something else entirely. Ezra returned to his office, trying to focus on paperwork, feed orders, maintenance schedules. But his daughter Luna's scheduled call came at 2 p.m., and somehow the conversation went places he didn't expect. How's the feedlot? Luna asked from her home in California, video call showing her kitchen where she worked remotely as a marketing consultant. Fine, standard operations. You sound weird, Dad. Something wrong? Ezra hesitated, then found himself describing the day. Delilah's question about Thunderstrike walking, Dr. Clearwater's comment about minimum standards, the strange discomfort that had been building since morning. So what are you going to do? Luna asked when he finished. Do? Nothing. There's nothing to do. Everything's running exactly as it should. Then why does it bother you? I didn't say it bothers me. Dad, I can hear it in your voice. Ezra looked out his office window at the feedlot spread before him, pens arranged in efficient rows, animals standing in spaces calculated to maximize profit while meeting legal requirements. A business he'd run successfully for nearly 2 decades. The transport truck arrives in 3 hours, he said. Thunderstrike gets loaded. This conversation becomes irrelevant. Does it? Before Ezra could answer, Clint appeared at his office door with an expression that made Ezra's stomach drop. Boss, we got a problem. Transport company just called. That replacement truck? Engine seized in Waco. They can't get another one here until Monday morning. Monday. 3 more days. Okay, Ezra said slowly. So, Thunderstrike stays through the weekend. Guess so. After Clint left, Luna's voice came through the phone speaker. Dad, you still there? Yeah. 3 more days. Maybe that's not a delay. Maybe that's time to actually look at what's bothering you. Ezra ended the call and walked back to Thunderstrike's pen. The bull stood in exactly the same position as this morning, as yesterday, as 93 days ago. Not suffering. Not sick. Just standing. Existing within dimensions that were technically adequate and fundamentally insufficient. 1 day had become 3. And Ezra Hawthorne was beginning to suspect that everything he'd believed about running a good operation might be built on not looking closely at what good actually meant. Ezra arrived before sunrise, earlier than necessary. He told himself it was to check water systems. But his feet carried him directly to Thunderstrike's pen. The bull stood in the same position as yesterday, same as every morning for 93 days. Not because he was sick, but because there was nowhere else to stand. Ezra had designed these pens himself, calculating dimensions based on Texas regulations. Each measurement met or exceeded legal requirements. He'd been proud of that precision. Now, watching Thunderstrike exist within those boundaries, Ezra felt something he'd avoided for 2 decades, the difference between legal and right. You're here early. Delilah approached with coffee thermoses. Couldn't sleep, he admitted. They stood together, drinking coffee as dawn revealed the feedlot's careful organization. Everything visible, measured, optimized. Ezra, I've known you since 3rd grade. I remember when you brought injured rabbits to school because you couldn't stand seeing things hurt. That was 40 years ago. Was it? Or did you learn not to look because looking made business harder? Before Ezra could respond, Clint's truck arrived. Unusual for Saturday. Boss, need to talk. Clint sat in Ezra's office, fidgeting with his cap. I've worked here 11 years, never caused problems. Best handler I've ever had. What's this about? Thunderstrike. I can't stop thinking about loading him Monday. Clint looked up. I've loaded hundreds of animals. Never thought twice. But these past 3 days, something's different. What's different? Me. I'm seeing what I always ignored. That bull isn't aggressive or sick. He's just aware. You can see it in how he watches. He knows what's happening here. They're livestock, Clint. Commercial cattle. I know. But maybe we should treat them like they're aware they exist. Clint stood. I'll load him Monday, but I wanted you to know it bothers me now, and I don't think that bother is going away. Luna called an hour later. Dad, I've been researching feedlot operations all night. Studies show cattle experience stress responses even in regulation-compliant facilities. Chronic low-grade distress that doesn't show as suffering but accumulates. Where are you going with this? The question you're avoiding, is legal the same as ethical? This is commercial operation, not philosophy. You called yesterday bothered by something you couldn't name. Now you're defensive because I'm naming it. Her voice softened. What if the system itself is the problem? The framework that says efficiency matters more than basic dignity. Dignity for livestock? They're sentient. They experience their lives. Using them commercially doesn't mean pretending they're objects. Dr. Clearwater appeared unexpectedly around noon. I couldn't stop thinking about yesterday. So I filed a report with the Texas Veterinary Medical Board questioning whether regulations adequately address psychological welfare. Ezra felt his world tilt. You reported me? No. I reported the system. You're in complete compliance. That's the problem. Regulations prevent obvious abuse, starvation, injury, disease, but they don't address intelligent animals kept in physically adequate but psychologically insufficient conditions. What happens now? Probably nothing. Board will review, likely dismiss because you follow every rule. But I took an oath to animal welfare, and I'm thinking welfare means more than not actively suffering. That evening, as sunset painted Texas sky orange, something happened that became the turning point. Thunderstrike suddenly bellowed. Not distress or pain. Something else. A long, resonant call that echoed across the feedlot. Every other animal fell silent. In that silence, Ezra heard what he'd been avoiding. Acknowledgement. Thunderstrike wasn't protesting. He was making his existence known, reminding everyone he was here, aware, experiencing every moment of carefully regulated confinement. The call lasted maybe 10 seconds. The silence lasted much longer. Ezra stood in his efficient feedlot, understanding that Monday's truck would arrive on schedule, Thunderstrike would be loaded according to protocol, and everything would continue functioning exactly as regulations required. But nothing would feel the same, because once you really see what you've been trained to ignore, you can't unsee it, even if you don't know what to do with what you've seen. Sunday morning arrived with deliberate quiet. No deliveries, no visits, no calls. Just Ezra, his feedlot, and the awareness growing since Thursday's simple delay. The largest bull on the farm was kept one extra day due to a delay. That's all it was supposed to be. A minor logistical adjustment. But what followed, the questions, the observations, the unraveling of comfortable assumptions, had halted the crew in ways Ezra was only beginning to understand. He stood at Thunderstrike's pen at 7 a.m., watching the bull do what he'd done for 94 days. Stand, shift weight occasionally, exist within boundaries that met every legal requirement while providing nothing resembling life. "Morning, Ezra." Dr. Clearwater approached in casual Sunday clothes. "Magnolia, didn't expect you today." I couldn't stay away. After filing that report, I kept thinking, we measure what's wrong with animals. Disease, injury, malnutrition, but we never measure what's missing. What's missing? Purpose, engagement, choice. She gestured at Thunderstrike. That bull can't decide when to walk, where to explore, who to interact with. Every aspect controlled for our convenience and his commercial value. We call that welfare because he's not actively suffering. Ezra sipped coffee, tasting bitterness. So what's the alternative? Shut down every feedlot in Texas? I don't know. That's what makes this difficult. Dr. Clearwater's honesty was more unsettling than accusation. I'm a veterinarian working within a system that defines my profession. But this weekend, I realized I've been asking the wrong questions my whole career. Delilah arrived mid-morning with her 15-year-old nephew Marcus. The teenager approached Thunderstrike's pen with unselfconscious curiosity. He's huge. How much does he weigh? 2,800 pounds, Ezra answered. Does he have a name? Thunderstrike. Cool. Does he like being here? The question hit Ezra hard. Marcus wasn't asking about regulations or standards. He was asking the most basic question. Does this animal like his life? He's well cared for, Ezra said carefully. That's not what I asked. Delilah touched Marcus's shoulder. The business doesn't work if we ask questions like that. Why not? Nobody answered. Clint showed up at noon, claiming he needed to check equipment, but clearly unable to stay away. They stood together, Ezra, Delilah, Dr. Clearwater, Clint, Marcus, watching Thunderstrike with attention they'd never given any animal before. Boss, I've been thinking about what happens after we load him tomorrow. He goes to a breeding facility in Nevada. For how long? 3, maybe 4 years, until he's not productive. And then? Ezra knew. Everyone knew. Thunderstrike would eventually reach slaughter, his value reduced to meat weight, standard cycle. But saying it aloud, with everyone watching the bull's patient awareness, felt different than filing paperwork. Then he's processed, Ezra said flatly. Marcus frowned. You mean killed? Yes. Because he got old? Because he's no longer economically viable. That seems wrong. That's how the industry works, Delilah said gently. These aren't pets, Marcus. I know. But just because it's how it works doesn't mean it's how it should work, right? Out of the mouths of children, a 15-year-old cutting through decades of rationalization with simple moral clarity. Luna called that afternoon. Dad, how are you holding up? Everyone keeps showing up. We're all just standing around watching that bull. What are you seeing? Ezra struggled to articulate. The difference between an animal that's alive and an animal that's living. Thunderstrike is alive, healthy, fed, medically sound. But he's not living. He's existing inside a system designed to extract value while meeting minimum legal obligations. What are you going to do? Nothing. What can I do? The truck comes tomorrow. Thunderstrike gets loaded. The system continues. But you'll know what you know now. Yes. And that changes things, doesn't it? Even if actions stay the same, knowing changes everything. After Luna hung up, Ezra reviewed Monday's schedule. Transport arrival, 7 a.m. Loading, 30 minutes. Departure, 8 a.m. Thunderstrike would be gone by mid-morning. Except nothing felt normal anymore. Dr. Clearwater knocked before leaving. Ezra, whatever happens, you're not a bad person. You built this following every rule. Questioning it now shows character, not failure. Doesn't change anything, though. Maybe not tomorrow, but questions don't disappear. They accumulate. Eventually enough people ask them and systems change. She paused. The delay that kept Thunderstrike here? Maybe it wasn't just a broken truck. Maybe it was about giving us time to actually see what we've been doing. As sunset approached, Ezra made final rounds. Thunderstrike stood silhouetted against Texas sky, patient and aware, existing within boundaries that would never be adequate no matter how perfectly they met regulations. Tomorrow, the truck would arrive. The crew would load him. Everything would proceed according to plan. But everyone who'd stood at that pen would carry forward uncomfortable knowledge. Compliance and correctness weren't the same. Legal didn't equal ethical. Minimum standards measured the floor, not the ceiling. The largest bull had been kept one extra day, and what followed had halted the crew in ways Monday wouldn't reverse, because seeing couldn't be unseen. And questions, once asked, demanded answers even when none existed. The transport truck arrived at 6:47 a.m., 13 minutes early. Ezra heard it rumbling up the drive while checking water systems, the sound punctual, efficient, indifferent to everything that had shifted over 4 days. The driver climbed out, professional, someone who'd loaded thousands of cattle. Ezra Hawthorne got paperwork for one Brahman bull, Thunderstrike, heading to Silver Point breeding in Nevada. He's in Pen 7. Should have him loaded in 20 minutes. 20 minutes. 4 days of questions and moral reckonings, reducible to a 20-minute procedure that happened hundreds of times daily. Clint appeared from the equipment barn, walking slowly. His face showed professional competence, but something underneath had changed. He carried the loading pole with familiar ease, but movements felt heavier. "Morning, boss." "Morning." Delilah's truck pulled in unexpectedly. Then Dr. Clearwater's. Both walked toward the loading area without explanation, needing to witness this. "Didn't expect a crowd," the driver remarked. "They're friends," Ezra said. At 7 a.m., Clint opened Thunderstrike's pen. The bull had been standing in the same position every morning for 94 days, but now his awareness seemed sharper. He knew something was changing. "Easy, big guy," Clint said softly, voice carrying none of its usual detachment. "We're just going to walk you out." Thunderstrike didn't resist. He never had. That was what made this difficult. The bull's calm cooperation with a system designed to extract value from his existence. He walked when guided, stopped when directed, moved through the loading chute with patient compliance. The driver positioned himself at the trailer, nice and easy. But as Thunderstrike reached the ramp, something nobody expected happened. He stopped, not in resistance or fear, not aggression, just stopped. His massive frame filled the chute, immovable not through force but through simple refusal to take the next step. "Come on, boy," the driver said, applying standard pressure. "Let's go." Thunderstrike didn't move. He stood at the ramp base, looking into the trailer's dark interior, and for the first time in 94 days, chose not to comply. Clint lowered his pole. "Boss, he's not fighting. He's just not going." "Apply more pressure," the driver instructed. "They do this sometimes." "No," Clint said quietly. "Look at him. Really look." They all looked. Thunderstrike stood motionless, breathing steady, posture calm, not defiant, not aggressive, simply present in a way he'd never been allowed before, making the smallest possible choice. Not yet. "I can get him loaded," the driver said, reaching for electric prod. "Standard procedure." "Don't!" Ezra's voice surprised everyone. "Just wait." "Mr. Hawthorne, I've got a schedule." "I know what the schedule says." Silence. Everyone watching Thunderstrike make the first autonomous decision he'd been permitted in 3 months. The choice to exist in his own time, on his own terms, for whatever brief moment he could claim. 30 seconds passed, then a minute. The driver checked his watch. Thunderstrike took 1 step forward, then another. He walked into the trailer on his own timing, with his own agency, however small. The gate closed with mechanical finality. "There we go," the driver said, relieved. "Just needed a moment." Clint's face showed something different. He didn't need a moment. He took one. That's not the same thing. Paperwork signed. The trailer pulled away, carrying Thunderstrike toward Nevada, toward breeding service, toward eventual slaughter. The system continuing exactly as designed. But the crew stood motionless long after the truck disappeared. "What just happened?" Delilah asked. Dr. Clearwater's voice was steady but affected. "We watched an animal exercise the only freedom available, the freedom to wait 30 seconds before complying. And somehow, that felt more significant than 4 days of perfect regulatory compliance." Ezra walked to his office, aware his feedlot would continue operating, cattle would keep moving, everything would function as required. But something fundamental had shifted. The crew had been halted not by what Thunderstrike did, but by what they finally allowed themselves to see. Meeting minimum standards was just that, minimum. Animals who complied with systems designed to use them might be doing something far more complex than obedience. They might be surviving the only way they knew how, and recognizing that changed everything, even when it changed nothing at all. The feedlot operated exactly as it always had. Cattle arrived, moved through systems, departed for buyers, feed schedules maintained, health protocols followed, every regulation met. Nothing had changed. Everything had changed. Ezra stood at Pen 7, Thunderstrike's former space now occupied by a different bull, watching the same routine he'd overseen for 18 years. But he saw it differently now. The boundaries meeting minimum requirements, the efficient systems extracting maximum value, animals standing in spaces legally adequate and fundamentally insufficient. He saw what he'd trained himself not to see. "Morning, boss." Clint approached with his clipboard, but something had shifted permanently. Same competence, but automatic detachment was gone. "New arrival settling?" "Fed, watered, healthy, all boxes checked." Clint paused. "But you're not really asking about boxes anymore, are you?" "No." Silence, both understanding the question beneath every question. Is this right? Not legal, not compliant, not efficient. Right. Neither had an answer. Dr. Clearwater's weekly inspection had taken on different quality. Same medical assessments, same protocols, same compliance forms. But her reports now included a new section: behavioral observations. "I don't have authority to require changes based on these," she told Ezra. "Regulations don't recognize psychological welfare as measurable standard, but I'm documenting anyway." "Why?" "Because eventually enough documentation creates evidence. Evidence creates questions. Questions create change. Might not happen in our lifetime, but someone will look at these records and ask why we measured everything except what mattered most." Delilah's hay deliveries had become longer visits, coffee, standing at pens, talking about moral discomfort they now shared. "Marcus asked about Thunderstrike last week. Wanted to know if we found out if he liked his life. What did you tell him?" "I told him we finally asked the right question. Just too late to change the answer." Luna called every few days. Conversations evolved from checking on her father to processing something neither fully understood. "Dad, I've been reading about systemic change, how it happens." "And?" "It's never one dramatic moment. It's accumulation. Small shifts in how people see things, repeated until enough people can't unsee anymore." thoughtful. Thunderstrike didn't change your operation, but he changed how you see it. That's not nothing. Feels like nothing. Everything's still running the same. Is it? Or are you running it with awareness you didn't have before? That night, Ezra sat reviewing operational reports. Numbers told their usual story. Efficiency, profit, compliance, everything measured, optimized. But between lines, he saw different numbers. Days standing, steps limited, choices reduced, lives reduced to value extracted. He pulled out a blank notebook and started writing, not operational notes, observations, questions, discomforts. What if minimum standards aren't enough? What does psychological welfare look like for commercial livestock? Can a system be legal and still be wrong? No answers. But he wrote the questions anyway because change started with people asking questions they used to ignore. The largest bull on the farm had been kept 1 extra day due to a delay. 4 extra days that should have meant nothing. But what followed? Forced observation, uncomfortable questions, unraveling assumptions, had halted the crew in ways that persisted long after Thunderstrike disappeared. Ezra still ran his feedlot. Clint still loaded animals. Dr. Clearwater still conducted inspections. Delilah still delivered hay. But they did it with awareness, with discomfort, with questions that had no easy answers but demanded to be asked anyway. The system continued. Regulations remained unchanged. Industry operated as designed. But somewhere in Austin, Texas, on a modest feedlot meeting every legal standard, a small group had stopped pretending compliance and conscience were the same thing. They couldn't fix the system, couldn't save every animal, couldn't even save the one bull whose delay had changed how they saw everything. But they could carry forward uncomfortable knowledge that seeing and unseeing were choices, that minimum and sufficient were different words for a reason, that animals experienced their lives even when those lives served primarily human needs. Maybe, eventually, enough people asking uncomfortable questions would accumulate into change. Or maybe not. But asking had become unavoidable. And in an industry built on not asking, that was something. Thunderstrike was in Nevada now, standing in different pen, serving different purpose, still existing within systems designed around efficiency rather than dignity. But in Austin, on a small feedlot where mechanical delay had forced 4 days of observation, the crew he'd left behind could no longer ignore what they'd finally allowed themselves to see. The largest bull had been kept 1 extra day, and what followed would never stop halting them, quietly, every single day they continued choosing to look.